Automobilista 2 frustrated a lot of people early on, but more and more people seem to be coming around and starting to appreciate this sim, and rightly so. A lot has happened in the 10 or so months since the initial early access release of this title, so today I'm going to do a first on this channel and re-review a racing sim based on the significant updates since the first review. Let's go. So to start off, I just want to add a quick preamble to this video. I'm seeing some people who've already deleted AMS2 and don't plan to reinstall it at any point, and to those people, it's a dead title, and that kind of reminds me of another title. In mid-2019, I did a video about a certain other sim that had less than 100 concurrent users about 10 months after release, and I questioned whether or not it was dead already. Hardly anyone was racing in online races in that sim, and the driving experience wasn't what users had hoped it would be based on the previous title from the same developer, and many of the bugs that fans were asking to be fixed had yet to be addressed. Some of you probably caught on to the fact that I'm talking about Assetto Corsa Competizione, and not long after I posted my video in mid-2019 about it being dead, the sim really found its groove in the community, and many of the bugs were addressed, and now it's knocking on the door of having 10,000 concurrent users. Will Automobilista 2 follow suit? Who knows, but the point is that things can look bleak even for great titles. So if Reza continues to listen to their user base and make improvements, there's nothing to say this title won't live up to its full potential. So with that in mind, let's get into my review. Alright, so we'll start this off by addressing the elephant in the room and talking about the most divisive aspect of Automobilista 2, and that is of course the driving experience. A few of you have asked me to share my opinion about how the sim drives now based on recent updates, and I gotta say, I like it. I have a great time when I drive AMS2, but I know many people don't. For me, if you split up all my racing sims into an upper tier and a lower tier in terms of the quality of physics and force feedback, AMS2 for me belongs in the upper tier somewhere. I don't necessarily feel the same level of connection to the car that I would in an R Factor 2 or Assetto Corsa Competizione, but it still does for me belong in that upper tier. I have a great time with it. So I don't necessarily put it at the top of those rankings, but certainly in that upper tier, and very, very good. Like all sims, there are cars that make you smile to drive and others that you kind of get frustrated with, but overall I think the quality is high here. So the cars I'd recommend trying at this point include the Rocco 001, the Ultima race car, or any of the GT1 cars if you're either trying the sim for the first time or if you haven't tried any of the latest builds. So that brings us to the content, and this is something I'm kind of torn about. On one hand, one thing that really drew me into the first AMS title was the rare content. Cars like the Metalmaro AJR or tracks like Cascavel are uncommon to say the least in sim racing, so it was refreshing to see that unique and well-made content. At the time of this writing, AMS2 has built a good base of content now. Imola, Spa, Nürburgring, Monaco, Hockenheim, and a number of other big-name tracks can be found either as base content or as DLC. And Porsche, Mercedes, BMW, and McLaren are among the bigger-name car manufacturers now present in the sim as well. There's very few real-world skins included for these cars, but thankfully the mod community is coming through, and there's now dozens of great skins available on Race Department for free. The current trend in the second AMS title seems to be toward more mainstream content. Cars like the Porsche GT3 and tracks like Spa that can be found in nearly every other sim are now present here. But like I said, I'm torn about this. On one hand, I hate to see one of my favorite sims, which historically has focused on and excelled at niche content, now trending toward what every other sim does. On the other hand, I do see that the mainstream content will boost sales for Reza, and at the end of the day, this is their business, and of course they want to make good money as a game developer, and also if the content has more mainstream appeal, it will help boost numbers in the online races, so it could be good for us all. That brings us to the multiplayer experience in AMS2, and it's kind of difficult to rate at this point because there is not a huge player base. Overall, I think it's a well-designed system, but fully populated races are hard to come by. Setting up and joining races is pretty simple. It's finding the other drivers to compete against that's the problem, but there might actually be something big on the horizon soon for AMS2. SimRacing.gp, which allows you to join sim racing community races, will soon support AMS2 instead of just AC and ACC, so that'll mean that leagues and one-off fun races by some of the more popular sim racing communities will start to become more commonplace in this sim, and that should drive sales and popularity. So I think the sim's only going to get larger in terms of its player base, and that could mean the online experience will improve in kind. Let's hope there's a good ranking system for drivers to go with that as well, but it's hard to tell at this point. We'll have to wait till it gets a little bit more popular to see how the multiplayer plays out overall. So talking now about the single player experience in Automobilista 2, and I would argue that this is the most improved aspect of AMS2 since its initial release. It's been pretty bad. AI historically has been pretty bad in this sim. Sometimes it gets better and then it would seem to get worse, and there's been times actually where it was so bad that I couldn't finish videos because I couldn't stand to race against the AI long enough. However, with this video I filmed a whole bunch, or I recorded rather, a whole bunch of different scenarios, different cars, different tracks, and I had a blast. I'm so shocked, so blown away by how far the AI has come in recent builds. It went from being borderline undrivable a few months ago to being awesome. I tried it in a whole bunch of different scenarios and each one of them felt really good. I had a great time racing against the AI, so hats off to Reza. The AI development has been incredible in recent builds, and AI is never really finished, and I'm not going to claim the AI is perfect in this, but if you're into single player racing, I think, in my opinion at least, it's a very solid title. And there's also a great time trial mode where you can pit your fastest hot lap against the rest of the world, and I know custom championships has been a sticking point for a lot of people, really looking for that, but we're hearing that that is coming soon, so it can only enhance the single player experience. But overall, this now stands as a really fun single player racer, and I'm very impressed. And now let's talk about some of the more surface level aspects of Automobilista 2. So talking a little bit about graphics, I did cover graphics in a recent video, but I think they're great. In fact, I think they're among the best of any racing sim I own, and it doesn't tax your system too heavily to run this on low settings, and those low settings look really good. Plus it has easy VR and triple screen support, so that means AMS2 pretty much has you covered no matter your system capabilities or setup. But like everything in the sim community, there isn't universal agreement on the graphics of AMS2, but I think nearly all who play it thinks it looks very good. And the sounds are good as well in AMS2, and this was a big question for me leading up to release. I've never liked the sounds in Project Cars 2, so I wondered if AMS2 would be constrained by the shared Madness engine, but thankfully that hasn't been the case. I mean, Race Room and ACC are still my top sounding sims, but AMS2 does rank very high here. Everything from the dull roar of the V8 supercars to the screaming F1 V10s, I think they've got you nicely covered for sounds in AMS2. So just one more point to cover before I get to my conclusion, and that is the user interface. And I hate to keep going back to this as a reference point, but ACC is my benchmark for UI. The load times are amazing, and it only takes a few clicks to set up any race or driving scenario, and Automobilista 2 is not far off that. I'm never confused as to how to select a car, track, opponents, weather, time of day, and it loads pretty quickly as well. So honestly, that's good enough for me. And possibly the UI matters less to me than other people, but I will say it's nice to not have to deal with a daunting menu system, something like R Factor 2. In fact, it's so bad in R Factor 2 that it makes me play the sim less, but that's not the case here in AMS2. They have a nice logical flow to the menus, and it's quick to boot, so good user interface. Now let's get to the conclusion. Alright, so on to the conclusion. Does Automobilista 2 still have flaws? Yes. Is it a fun sim in spite of these flaws? Absolutely. The way I look at Automobilista 2 is as a sim that's easy to just jump in and enjoy yourself. Within reason, I try not to let technical shortcomings ruin an entire simulation experience. For example, I ignored the dated graphics in the first AMS to enjoy the outstanding driving feel, and in Project Cars 2, I ignored the bad force feedback in order to enjoy the VR experience. So when people say that the cars are overreactive and twitchy in AMS2, or that the car classes need to be filled out more, I don't disagree, but for me it doesn't ruin the greater experience for me. But I understand that for some of you it might. For example, if you're a fan of driving F1 cars only, the driving feel in Assetto Corsa is probably superior because the cars aren't so twitchy, and having only 4 GT3 cars right now in AMS2 may feel too limited for some people coming over from Project Cars 2 or ACC. If your thing is the detailed tire feel of R Factor 2, you probably won't find that when you come over to AMS2. But again, that's not how I feel. I see this title as doing a lot of things very well. You can jump in and easily navigate your way into a race or a hot lap session and have lots of interesting cars and tracks to choose from, and enjoy some great visuals and sounds along the way, and experience good force feedback and sensible driving physics for most of the cars most of the time. I would recommend this title to experienced sim racers who are not particularly tied to any one racing title and looking for a bit of a fresh experience, or to a new or inexperienced sim racer looking for a simple way to get some fun track time in a sim. Automobilista 2 does some things great, many things good, and a few things not so good or needing improvement. But I have confidence that the next year or so of development will continue the improvement trend we've seen, and I expect this title to become more loved and accepted by the sim community as time goes on. Thanks so much for watching, and please let me know your own experiences with AMS2.